This film is so rich that I want to dive right into it, but I feel like we really should start with your USC time, because the truth is so much has happened since you were a film student here in terms of also the evolution of USC, and I'm curious if you'll take us back in time to what it was like to be a USC student when you were here.
I knew you'd ask that. Well, I mean, it's completely driving a little bit around USC that I did, and I don't recognize anything at all. But I do certainly remember being here, and it was a time when you didn't do a lot of work with the camera, for instance. Other people, the camera was a sacred thing that was there. You kind of looked at it, but I never got to touch it. But I was there, and the wonderful thing about going to SV as a student then was that you got to see a lot of movies that you would not otherwise have seen ever. And I remember some of those. And there were real living legends around at that time, or slightly later, like Jean Renoir, who was here and who came and talked to us and stuff. So,
what I thought was really interesting is that your thesis film, you wound up going to Venice, Italy to shoot, which I feel like is something we don't hear a whole lot about today, with people having the ambition to go shoot their film in a completely foreign country.
Well, it was just a place I went to. I mean, the first time I ever went to Europe was in 1950, and I was mainly in France. And then I wanted to go to Venice, and I did go to Venice. And it just, I mean, I couldn't, I was overwhelmed by it. It was the most marvelous place I'd ever been. And I was determined to go back to Venice and make a film there. And that's why I chose to make that particular film. It was just to go back to Venice.
And so tell us a little bit about how that film began your professional career. At that point, what were the opportunities for young filmmakers who had a short film?
Well, there were a lot of young filmmakers, and some of them did very well indeed. But I was lucky in that I had a father who was happy to, more or less happy, to supply me with the funds that I needed for my first 2 or 3 films, which are all documentaries. And the Venice film, the idea of the Venice film was what I was sort of showing how Venice as the subject of landscape painters. So we started out showing all the painters who had painted Venice, particularly as a subject, and we began with that, and moved on to other things.
Tell us a little bit about the story of actually, coming to USC. You went to the University of Oregon for interior.
Well, the reason I came here was that I would have been drafted and sent to Korea if I hadn't come here. And my father didn't think that was a good idea, that I should be drafted at that particular moment. But before very long, the Korean War was over. But we'd already decided I would come to USC and to the film school. And when I decided to work in film, I really wanted to be a set designer. And that was what I planned to do. As it turned out, that never happened. But I've been always very, very much involved in the sets of my own films. And we just moved on from opportunity to opportunity of things that interested me. And then I began to do my features.
Well, what brought you to India?
I made a short film about Indian miniature painting. The schools of painting, there are 2 of them. There's Hindu and a Muslim school, and they between them they did a wonderful style of miniature painting. By miniature, I mean the pictures are about like that, sometimes smaller. And I wanted to make a film about that, and so I did. And then that, plus the Venice film that I'd made, induced the Asia Society of New York to give me a grant to go to India and make a film about a sort of historical portrait of Delhi. And I liked that idea. And that's what they gave me $20,000, which doesn't sound like anything today. But in those days, $20,000, you could do a lot with it. Not enough to make a film, but as I said, I had a father there who helped me out at the end. Anyway, I did go to India because of that grant. That's what sent me there the first time. And I had no idea that I would be so taken by India, but I was. Still am.
You, by the time you met Ismail, he was already a filmmaker as well, right?
Yes, and he'd already he'd been nominated for an Oscar himself. He made he was a student at the NYU Film School, and he made a film with some other people there about an Indian, it was basically a dance film, and he made that film, which then got nominated. But he was, Ismail and all that, what they were meant for each other.
Tell us a little bit about the creation of the company, Merchant Ivory, making the decision to root yourself in India, for a while at least, and how you would go about making your first or second film.
Well, I wanted to go back to India to do some more shooting for the film The Delhi Way, which was the film about Delhi. And I thought there were things that I would like to have, things I wanted to put in such a film. And so by this time I had met Ismail, and so I decided to go back to India. Well, he was now returning to India after his Hollywood period, and so he came at about the same time I did to India, but someone had given him, while he was in California, someone had given him a copy of Ruth Jagballa's fourth novel, The Householder, and whoever it was a writer in one of the studios, and I think her name was Isabel Leonard, and she had given Ismail a copy of The Householder to read, and she said, you might be able to make this into a movie. No one in this place would ever touch it, but you might want to do it. And Ismail remembered that, and so he was determined, in fact, or he remembered what was said, and decided he wanted to make The Householder. So we had to go up to Delhi from Bombay, where we were, and convince the writer of the novel, Ruth Jagballa, that we wanted, we had to get her rights to make her novel into a film. We went to see her, and we wanted her to write the screenplay. And then she said, well, I've never written a screenplay. I don't know if I could write a screenplay. And Ismail then said, well, I've never produced a film, and Jim's never directed one. So she agreed. And that's how Merchant Ivory was born.
In your memoir, you mentioned that you didn't have a relationship with Ruth, so you crashed her house for a private party?
That was earlier, yeah.
Yeah.
No, I didn't know her at all. I crashed a party at her house on New Year's in Delhi. Yeah, I did. I'm not the sort of person that goes crashing out parties of people I don't know. Generally, I'm not. And that's what happened.
Well, Ruth wrote a lot of your features, and I'm curious to know a little bit about the decision to also adapt other people's work, because I can sort of understand the author having command of her own novels and turning them into screenplays, but that relationship extended to Henry James and E.M. Forster. Like, what was her approach to working with other authors' material?
Well, for instance, her approach was as a very, very good writer on her own, and her approach was care and dedication to what was there, but not just abject doing it. I remember, there were things that she sometimes didn't like that she thought could be improved. I remember she improved E.M. Forster at one point. It needed some improvement, story-wise, and she did that, and she just jumped right in and did it.
Are you talking about the sequence in Morris where
no, Ruth didn't write
Morris? No, she didn't write it, but she had
no. But later on, we had problems with Morris, and later on she came and solved those problems.
Well, tell us about the films that you made in India, because you had quite some success very early on, before you then started to make films in England and France, US. Had you been meaning to continue making films in India, or was that just something that was generated by the success of the films?
I never just went to India and stayed there. I always came back fairly soon. I'd go for several months, and in one case, when we made The Householder, I was there over a year. But on the whole, I would go back and forth a lot. I didn't want to live my life in India, and I wanted to work in other places, and particularly the United States.
Presumably, though, with Ismail's connections to raise financing in India, was there sort of a goal to eventually move Merchant Ivory into international spaces?
I wouldn't call it a goal. It wasn't anything we just did. But the first film that we shot outside India was in fact an Indian film, which we made for, it's hard to believe, but we made it. It was for TV in the United States. It was Autobiography of a Princess with Madhur Jaffrey and James Mason. And, yeah.
So I think everyone who's seen your films is, of course, always particularly focused on the excellence of the acting. And you have an incredible cast of actors throughout your entire career. Can you tell us a little bit about your approach to casting? Was there lengthy audition process, or did you have sort of an understanding of someone's work that you thought?
In finding actors, it was really because we had good, they were found for us by casting directors who knew, at least in New York, but by this time we were in New York, and they had their eye on this and that person from both films and people on the stage. And so that, they said that sort of helped to acquaint us with people we wouldn't have known. It's all very well to know about stars, and they're there. You know all about them, and you want them or you don't. But there were a lot of people that we didn't, who became stars. A good example of that is Hugh Grant, and there were other people like that too.
Helena Bonham Carter.
And Helena Bonham Carter, yeah.
And then there are others, such as Vanessa Redgrave, who obviously had extraordinary career by the time you started working with her. Can you tell us a little bit about some of these actors that you sought out or wanted to find a project with, or if this was?
Well, Vanessa was such a person.
Yeah.
I really admired her. I thought she was a wonderful actress and wonderful in many ways. Apart from being beautiful, So,
But was it a question of finding something that was right for her, or did you think that she?
no, it would have to be that. I don't think she would have accepted it if it hadn't been right. And then when we at first wanted to cast her in various films, and we pursued her, she wasn't interested. She was doing other things. I mean, she was very much involved in her political life, and which was frowned on in England a bit. And she began not getting as many parts as she had had because the people who could give her parts didn't really like her politics. And we were after her for, for years, really. And when no one would hire her anymore, then she decided to take up Merchant Ivory, which she did, and yeah.
Tell us about finding material, because obviously so many literary classics that you adapted, but a lot of very different work. And
if you think about it, most of the things we've done have been either 2 or 3 writers, and that's it. I mean, it would be several books by a writer, and we didn't go after many different writers. I mean, we had our favorites, like E.M. Forster, and to some extent Henry James, and there were one or 2 others, but we kept to their books, developed those. It's not like we were out to, just because it was a book, it was worth making into a movie. It had to be something that was right for us.
But there was a comment in the Merchant Ivory documentary that when it came down to the decision making, you were the president, Ismail was the Congress, and Ruth was the Supreme Court.
Right. That was it.
So tell us a little bit about that relationship.
It was until both of them died in our lives as well.
So what would you say was the biggest creative difference that Ruth had to step in and make the ultimate call on?
And do what?
Make the judgment call on. Well, in terms of like picking a project.
Sometimes things weren't quite okay. For instance, with E.M. Forster, it occurred to Ruth quite early on that really E.M. Forster wasn't so interested in the downtrodden people of this world that we assumed he was. He was much more at home and happier if he could be with educated upper middle class people. She saw that. Now, if you were making a film of one of his books in which there were the downtrodden, I can use that word, it's a terrible word, but you know what I mean. If there were people from working class people, the characters were valid characters and very useful to the story. She found a way to develop them, and she made them interesting.
The other major thing about Ishmael that we hear a lot about is his incredible magic as a fundraiser, and I feel like even in your years of great success, you still hear that he's making things sort of manifest out of thin air. So tell us a little bit about his.
It wasn't quite thin air, though. I mean,
No. I mean, I'm exaggerating, but obviously. Tell us about his fundraising abilities, which seem mythical.
Well, sometimes it would be a matter of years, but he would spot people who might, and in some circumstances, be willing to finance a movie. And when the right time came, and for the right person, he would leap in a way and convince that person. And I always wanted to, make that too. I mean, that was his attitude. Just he wasn't afraid. He just jumped in. Always.
Was there one film that was particularly hard to get financed?
I'd say they all were.
Even Remains of the Day?
Not Remains of the Day. No. Also Remains of the Day because someone else wanted to make it. someone else had the rights to it.
Yeah.
But then they got sort of bored somehow, didn't want to do it. I remember when we had just finished Howard's End, I think, and someone came up to me at a party and said, I've just read this book I have and I want to give it to you. And here it is. It was a paperback book. He said, here it is. And I think it really bored the hell out of me, but you'd probably like it. And it was Remains of the Day. So I took it and took it home and read it over the weekend, and yeah, I just thought this was the most wonderful book, and it would make a fantastic movie.
You know, when Howard's End first came out, I think it played at the Art House where I grew up for maybe over a year. I mean, it was a really successful film, and I'm curious if that sort of allowed you from that point forward a little bit more of I guess of some freedom with the stories you wanted to tell, that there were more opportunities.
Well, whatever film we made, we wanted to make. I mean, we weren't really looking around for a story. Oh, yeah, we would find stories. Or someone would, in fact, give us a novel, like Evan Cannell. You've just seen Mr. and Mrs. Bridge. Well, I mean, because Ruth also loved those two novels. And then one time I was asked to dinner, and Paul Newman was there. And after the dinner, and Joanne was going to do Mrs. Bridge for TV. And she was talking about it, but we thought that was a terrible idea. Why waste it on TV? And why not combine the two, Mrs. Bridge and Mr. Bridge, and make one film? And we were talking about this. We'd had dinner with Paul Newman, and somehow the subject came up of Mrs. Bridge. And I said, well, we really love, what we want to do is make Mr. and Mrs. Bridge. And then Paul Newman said immediately, and I'd be Mr. Bridge. Well, when he said that, it came about. Many things were like that.
Were the two novels sort of different points of view of the same events, or were they sort of sequentially different?
They were quite different, yeah.
Yeah.
The characters were often the same. I mean, Mrs. Bridge was always Mrs. Bridge, and Mr. Bridge the same, and the children, and so on. They didn't change, but yeah, there were different situations, sure.
I've heard you said that this film is, sort of touches on a lot of things that you feel a personal connection to from like growing up in the U.S. Tell us about wanting to make a film in the Midwest. It's a very obviously change of scenery from some of your prior
From Oregon.
Yeah.
I'm from Oregon.
Yeah.
And well, I as a family, the Bridge family was quite like my own family, and I could appreciate the similarities, and it intrigued me and made me. I mean, if I hadn't grown up in Klamath Falls, Oregon, I don't suppose I would have been so keen on Mr. and Mrs. Bridge. I've been quite in the same kind of family, but as the Bridge family. But that's what happens.
The ending of the film is really unique, and I don't think I've seen too many films where the resolution of the drama is done in an end title in terms of the action and the sequence. Tell us about how you landed on that.
People came along and said that we had to listen to, and we respected. And he said, you can't just have Mr. Bridge die, freeze to death in the car and die. That's not a way to end the movie. That's the way to end the book.
Oh, really?
Well, yeah. I mean, we assume that she freezes to death there in the book. And so we came up with that in fact, she doesn't freeze to death and she's rescued, and we just wanted to say those things. not let people wonder what had happened to poor Mrs. Bridge. But in that scene in the film where Paul is driving along and singing, he's driving the car, and I was in the back of the car down where you couldn't see, but the camera couldn't see me. I was kind of on the floor of the back seat of the car while Paul was singing. We had many takes of that, and I'll never forget that.
Tell us about your process on set. Do you like to do rehearsals? Is there time for it? Do the actors want it?
Sometimes they don't. Well, I tell you what the actors don't like, at least our actors didn't like, was to do like 20 takes, and then you're still going on and doing other takes. They thought, and they were usually right, that the first takes would be the best, because they had thought about the character, they thought about the scenes a lot, they had maybe read the book again and again and the script again and again, and they thought that when it finally came time to shoot it, they thought that what they had done was good. For me then to go along and say, no, well, let's do it, let's have another take, another take, another take, another take, and sometimes for no reason whatsoever as far as they can see. It wasn't like some, a chair broke down and people, some crazy thing. So they didn't like it. And so we respected that. Yeah. And it's not just the acting, it's everybody in the film. You have to suppose that people working on a film, whether they're writing the screenplay or whether they're writing the music or whether it's the set designer or whatever it is, that they are calling on their very best feelings for it and their own particular artistry that made it. That they're calling on that, and that the first things that they do after a long length of study is probably the best. The first few takes, not the 20th take. So we never usually went. Sometimes you had to, or something would go wrong, and obviously you have to do it again till you get it right. But it's usually not the actor. Not that the actors can't get it right. They get it right. It's something else that happens. The lighting or something, it's the wrong time of day or whatever it is.
You obviously have, world-class actors to work with, so casting is clearly a huge component of this, but what are some useful tips about directing actors that you can give us? Is there a language that you like to use? Is there a difference of working with someone like Paul Newman from an American background versus Emma Thompson or Anthony Hopkins?
Well, you have to. Everybody has, for one reason or another, you have to respect them and respect what it is that they. They're all trying to give their best, and they also may have interpretations of things that you had never thought of. But they're better and higher than what you never dreamed. That this wonderful thing, like the scene in Mr. and Mrs. Bridge of the novel. Oh, wait a minute, no, hold on.
With the scene in Remains of the Day?
Yeah, Remains of the Day with the novel.
Where he's holding it to his chest,
he says that she wants to move his hand off the book, or give her the book, and he doesn't want to do it.
This is the scene that my mother has called the sexiest moment in the history of cinema. Well, so that was, that's a really interesting example, because those two performances are magnificent, and that scene really brings it, the eroticism really of it together. What was you said that that was just kind of worked out there on the day. Did you feel?
Well, it was all done in sort of a hurry.
Yeah.
It had been planned for that day, and we hoped we would get it done because it was something that needed to be done all in a piece, and not you wouldn't come back the next day or so. It was a short scene, and Yeah, just kind of, they were doing it. Before we knew it, it was done.
But of course, Howard's End Remains of the Day was Howard's End was the first time you had worked with Emma Thompson and Anthony Hopkins. And I'm curious how you had gone about finding them, because it was really a magical combination and 2 films back to back.
Well, Emma Thompson kind of came to us and sent a message that she wanted to. In fact, she had read Howard's End, and Howard's End, and that she'd read it, and she just wanted to talk about it and see whether we were interested in making it. So she sent us a message, and he was acting again. He had a period when he had stopped acting, and then he made a film which he got the Academy Award for, and then immediately after that,
small film, Silence of the Lambs.
Yeah, Silence of the Lambs, and he was ready to go again.
And then, of course,
he was right.
Yeah.
And when you're making a film about the English, you have to be very, very careful about class accents. Now, for an American, we think we don't have class accents here, but in fact we do. But anyway, if you're a foreigner and you're making a film in England about the English, you have to be very, very, very careful. You can't have a single slip, because then other English people saying, "Oh, him, her, well," you know.
You then, of course, made subsequent films with Anthony Hopkins, including City of Your Final Destination. So, as you moved into the films after Remains of the Day, tell us about, I guess, just what was different in terms of, making more films with Americans, actually. So you worked with McNulty at that point, also.
Well, I just like doing it. I mean, I like being here and making films. I made a lot of films. Nobody's ever seen my American films, though Tonight was an example of one. But I made a lot of American films, and then there were actors I loved working with.
Well, tell us.
Like Christopher Reeve. Christopher Reeve is the most wonderful actor, but he never gets any credit for it.
I know yesterday we screened Slaves of New York, and I'm curious to know, because you really handpicked some of these films for us. I guess why you chose the films that you did.
You mean the films that you showed?
Yeah, for this weekend.
Well, I wanted you to have a good Indian film. I thought you had to know me and my films in terms of our Indian life. So that's why I chose Shakespeare Walla. And then it was all like that. I mean, it was just, I felt, I know a lot of people, young people, I mean, people not young, all young, I mean, in their 30s, have never seen A Room with a View. They've never seen any of those early films, which were such huge successes and nominated for Academy Awards and won Academy Awards and all that sort of thing. And they just had never seen them. So I wanted to have some films that some people had seen and they knew were really the good ones, like Remains of the Day. But I also wanted to have some that people would not know anything about.
His Daughter Never Cries.
Right.
And then The Golden Bowl. Is there a favorite of yours that doesn't get seen very, very often?
Well, Mr. and Mrs. Bridge would be one of those. Yeah. And Mr. and Mrs. Bridge is an orphan now. Doesn't have a distributor.
Right. Yeah. It was definitely eye-opening to see what happens when the distributor collapses.
Yeah.
What happens to the film rights?
Well, the distributor hadn't. He was there all through the film and the film coming out and all that. But then they were Canadian and they died. I liked the book. I read that author's books, and I liked them. And then I said, what I would like to do is co-direct it with the people who are buying the rights. That I wanted to co-direct the film with them, and they said, not a bad idea, let's do it. And so when that happened, but I said, I can't work with the script you have. I don't think the script you have does it justice. So I want to write my own script, which I did. And I wrote that screenplay, and then they decided they could never raise the money with their first screenplay. It wasn't just not up to the mark. But then with my screenplay, they were able to get the money right away. So I assumed that I would be co-directing it. But I think to co-direct a movie must be a terrible thing to do, and not a good idea. What happens if on the set your two directors can't agree on something, and somebody has to give way? You have to go one way or another, and then how does that make the person look who's had to give way? It can't be a good system of working. So it's probably a good idea that I was not a co-director of that film, but though if I had been, there would have been some things I would have done, but it could have been done.
You mean sort of the representation of the sexuality? That's what.
Sexuality can still be very sexual and shown in different kinds of ways. I mean, you don't. One way is a pan away from the scene into a flower garden or something. Happened in that film.
It's a pleasure and an honor to be here. So wonderful that you're here with us. I saw A Room with a View when I was 9 years old in Madrid, Spain, in the theater, as it was meant to be. And I fell in love with it, but I hadn't seen it in 40 years. And it's as fresh as the first time I saw it. It's a beautiful film. I was very disappointed when I was a kid that I didn't win Best Picture. And I never look at the Oscars again the same way. I'm really serious. I'm not making this up. And would you share a little bit of your memories about Julian Sands, who unfortunately passed away recently?
I'm sorry, what was that again?
About Julian Sands, working with him.
Julian Sands, working with him. He
was terrific. I mean, yeah, I knew him, and I thought he'd make a very good Julian. I mean, a very good. Oh gosh, what was his name? Huh? Oh, George, right? Yeah. See, isn't that terrible? I shouldn't be up here. Anyway. Yeah, I just thought he'd be really good, and he was. I tried to cast him in Morris. Once we made A Room with a View, and it had worked out so well, and everybody liked him so much, I thought, well, he'd be good in Morris. But he didn't. He didn't want to do Morris, and he said, I'm not good enough for it. I'm not a good enough actor to play that part.